go to page number 8, where it says transmission assembly, it's going to say that we need tray 2, tray 3, and bag 2.1. Tray 2 is the one we already opened, that we were using some of the parts for the lower part of the assembly. This is the rest of what was in that tray. And then we're going to also open tray 3. Tray 3. Right there. We're going to open tray 3 and we're going to look for bag 2.1. First thing you do is you take your mother plate. The bearings should be pre-installed. Or nice bearings. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the standoffs. Now I still need to get bag 2.1. Let me see if I can find it. Lots of bags in here. Bag 2. So this is main bag 2, and inside this there should be bag 2.1 or 2-1, same thing. And here it is, bag 2-1. So we're going to take some of these screws. We're going to need the bolts that are actually for this right here. We're going to use the 2.5 by 8 millimeter bolts. 2.5 by 8. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 8 of them. Perfect. Now we're going to take the standoffs, and as you look at the manual, we're going to basically put the standoffs just like this. So I'm going to put 4 standoffs, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go ahead and speed up the video. Okay, we have that done. Next step is we're going to put the main gear in the helicopter. And if you look at the manual, you must put the main gear with the how do you call it, the hole for the bolt on the main gear goes up. So we're gonna find the little nylon nut right here and the long bolt that has a shank, and we're gonna take our main shaft and we're gonna look at the main shaft, and we're gonna find the side of the main shaft that has the hole farther away from the end, and that's the side that goes towards the main gear. So we're going to stick this on the main gear. I'm going to line it up just like that, and then we're going to take our long shank bolt, and that's a 2.5. And then we're going to put our nut in there. And the gear itself has a recess to allow the nut to lock in place. So we're going to tighten this up. Do not over tighten this too much. There is a brass sleeve inside the gear to strengthen it, but you don't want to over tighten this, because if you do, you're going to strip things up. So just go easy on it. And that's how the main gear should go, right onto the plate. It should be smooth and free. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the pinion onto the secondary shaft. Here's our secondary shaft. And I've had people ask me before what kind of material this pinion is made out of. Well, this pinion is made out of aluminum, but it's not the same aluminum we had on the 700. This is a much stronger aluminum. So it should be just fine. We've had lots of flights and lots of testing on this. And the way you install this is the side on the shaft that has the hole the farthest from the end is the side that goes on the pinion. And for this we're going to need the long bolt here. If I could find the hole, here we go. And then we'll use the nylon nut on the other side. No need for Loctite because we have a nylon locking nut. And there is a recess on the other side of the pinion to hold the nut in place. Tighten this, do not over tighten this either because you don't want to strip the nut. So now we can just let this drop in here. Good. Next step is to install the servo tray, what holds your servos, and that goes on top of everything. That's actually pretty easy to do. You obviously want you want the flat side of this part to go down, and the side that has all the recesses to go up. Okay, this is done. I made a slight mistake. I over tightened the bottom bolts that hold the standoffs too much, so it was kind of hard to line up the top piece with the standoff, so I just loosened up the bottom ones a little bit again and just made sure it fitted properly, and then I retightened everything. So you don't want to that was just a dumb mistake on my part. You don't want to over tighten everything in the beginning, just to let everything fall in place the way it's supposed to. The next step is to go ahead and put the sleeve. There are some shims in this bag, the 10mm ID shims. Those are the ones that you want to use. And we're going to go ahead and 10mm OD correction. We're going to put them in here, literally just like this. We're going to go ahead and use I'm going to use 2 of them to begin with and see. In the manual it says 1, but sometimes it's a little too loose. What that does is that removes the slop, up and down slop on the main shaft. So then we're going to insert the bearing with the bearing block. And the bearing is held by these big bolts. These are 3x10s. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of bolts in here. Probably just 1 bolt. I think 2 bolts will be better. I'll put 2 bolts and I'll check for play. I'll show you exactly what I'm checking for. I'm not going to over tighten the bolts, but I'm going to tighten them firmly. So this piece right here, the bearing block, is actually pressed down against the servo tray. And then I'm just going to move up and down. And that is pretty good. There's absolutely no play. So we're going to leave 2 shims. If you would have tried with 1 shim and you had a little play, you would have had to use another shim. If you had too much compression, then you would feel this kind of being rough, but it feels pretty soft. Another thing that sometimes some of you guys will notice based on manufacturing tolerances is when you spin this, it might not spin as free as mine. It might be a little bit tighter. It might have a little bit of a tighter spot and a looser spot. Don't worry about it. That'll go away with the literally first 2, 3, 4 flights or whatever. So we're good. I'm going to put the last bolt in here. And I just realized I made a small mistake. I forgot to put the shim on top of the pinion, so that's an easy fix for now. I'm just going to remove the screw that holds the pinion, and I'm going to move this down, let the pinion come off, and then I'm going to put that tiny little shim right here. And the easiest way to do that is to put this upside down. Okay, and I'm very sorry if I made you guys mess up your build. I apologize. Now there's no slop up and down on the secondary shaft. There's no slop up and down on the main shaft. So now we're finally done with page number 8. We're going to move on to page number 9, which requires the installation of the one-way pulley. That's our one-way pulley assembly right here. It's already got the one-way bearing inside, as well as 2 radial bearings at the end. And if you look at the manual here, the small side diameter, the small diameter is supposed to face up. If you look at the pulley, this one's got a small diameter right here. This one's got a big diameter. So this pulley needs to go like this. And the next thing is to install the tail pulley right here. Now, with the tail pulley, be careful because it's disassembled. Not quite, but the bolts are not tightened all the way. So what you do is you remove these bolts, there's 3 of them, and then you put Loctite and then you put them back together. So I'm going to do that real quick while I speed up the video. Okay, so this is tight, and this will go literally like this. Now, if you have a little bit of slop up and down on this pulley, you can remove it by using this extra shim that they have in that bag. I'm going to go ahead and put the screw here. So we need to reach into the bags that didn't open quite yet. The bag 2.2 and 2.3, according to page 9, I hadn't opened those. 2.3 and 2.2. So this long screw right here doesn't have a shank. Again, don't worry about it. That's the screw that holds your one-way pulley to the secondary, correction, not the one-way, the tail pulley to the secondary shaft. So we're going to find the hole here. And one side of the pulley is threaded and one side is not. So you don't need a knot on the other side. There's a thread in the pulley itself here. We'll tighten that a little bit here. And yep, there's a lot of slop. So we're going to go ahead and put that shim in there real quick. Quite simple. Just throw the shim in between the one-way and the tail pulley. And now there's still some slop, which you want a little bit, but not a whole lot. So that's perfect. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and install these little standoffs. These standoffs are what was eventually going to hold your fiberless system, your fiberless unit. So you're going to need these little screws here. They're 2.5 by 6s, and you're going to need the 2 standoffs. And I'm going to speed up the video for this. Next, we're going to go ahead and install the boom nylon bolts. Clear some room here. I don't like the clutter. The boom nylon bolts, basically what you do is you insert them through this metal piece, and what this metal piece does is it basically strengthens or compresses, helps compress the boom onto the mother plate in a more uniform way, a more distributed way, I guess you could say. Put them right here, and then we're going to put the nylon nuts. I'm barely going to tighten the nylon nuts, maybe like go in like literally like 1 turn. Just because I want to be able to push down on this and have as much room between this metal piece and the mother plate to slide the boom in later. So we'll do that, and finally we're going to put our anti-rotation bracket, which is in back 2-3. We're done with page 9. Now moving on to page 10. This is the motor assembly. So we pretty much have our transmission built. This is ready to go. I'm going to set it aside. And we're going to go with the motor assembly. For this build, I'm going to use a quantum motor. And this is the Quantum 4120 1200. And this is a pre-production version of this this motor. It's actually a pretty nice motor. It's got good power. And the beauty of this is the shaft is the right length already. You don't have to cut the shaft. Now, if you had a Scorpion or a more than likely a Scorpion or any other brand, with the exception of the Contronic Pyro, you would have to cut your shaft. Now, the shaft needs to be cut down to 23 millimeters. And so ideally what you would do is you would take a set of calipers, or a micrometer, however you want to call it, like this, and you would measure 23 millimeters from the base of the motor right here to the tip of the shaft, and you would put a mark with a Sharpie, and you would cut it right there with the Dremel, with the cutting wheel and the Dremel. And then you would measure the last 5 millimeters of that shaft after you cut it down, and you would put a mark at 5 millimeters, and you would make sure that you have a flat that takes up about 5 millimeters at the end of that shaft. But because this motor is all good to go, it's got the right length, we're just going to go ahead and get to it and install it on the motor mount. So page 10, we're going to need tray 3, which we'll already open, and this is what was on tray 3, your actual motor mount. We're going to need bag 3, 3-1 and 3-2. So we're going to look for bag 3 right here. And -1 or -2 or 0.1 or 0.2, it doesn't matter. The manual says point, but it's actually a dash. So we have bags 3-1 and 3-2 right here. And I'm going to dump the contents of the bags on the table. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the motor, we're going to mount the motor on the motor mount. So as you look at the motor mount, picture your helicopter. This would be your helicopter right here, basically. You got to figure out which side you want the motor wires to come out of. That side or that side. I've always used the right side, or the right side of the helicopter, or the left side if you're looking at the helicopter through the front. So I'm going to mount this motor just like this with the wires coming out of this side. So I'm going to look for the bolt pattern here to make sure I can do that. And yes, I can. So we're going to use these tiny little bolts. They're basically 3x5s and 3/5s with the 2mm hex wrench. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put these long springs in through the front. Then we're going to put the short springs through these studs or bolts. Then we're going to put the big washer up top here. And finally we're going to put the locking nut, nylon nut. And I'm just barely going to tighten the nut lightly. In the manual it says to leave 5 millimeters between here and here. It doesn't have to be that accurate. You ideally want to leave a little bit of spacing in there so that when you when it's time to mount it on the helicopter, you don't have to tighten and tighten and tighten forever while you try to set your belt tension. So I'm just going to eyeball it here and just tighten it a little bit, but not too much. Just about there. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now these studs that are mounted onto the motor mount are green Loctited from the factory. Now, if for some reason at the factory they didn't put enough green Loctite, or they forgot to do so, I hope not. As you start tightening the nut, you're going to see the stud come out of the bottom and start moving. Stop. Don't continue. Just At that point, remove the knot and take a, I believe a 2mm wrench and loosen up, 2mm wrench, and remove the stud itself. Put a lot of green Loctite, put it back in until it's flush with the bottom of the motor mount, and let it dry. Let that green Loctite do its thing for a little while before you put the nuts back in. So that's that step for page 10, the motor mount. And the motor, we're going to set the motor aside. I will not be flying this model right away, so I'm not going to do all the soldering and everything I need to do to complete this build. I'm doing this also more for demonstration purposes, so I'm not going to solder this right now. But if I were you, this would be the right time to solder these connectors right here. So I'm going to put this to the side, and we're going to move on to chapter 6, which is the head.